Welcome back to Newsfeed PM. Let's get into business now. Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana has made one thing clear. South Africa is still tight in that financial position. Now, despite optimism over economic indicators this year, the National Treasury revised its annual economic growth forecast from 1.3% to 1.1% for the 2024 year. Godongwana says it's important to stay on the current fiscal path that will see tough decisions made around budget cuts and spending. He also emphasized the need to deal with the country's mounting debt. Treasury now expects government debt will reach more than 6 trillion rand, or 75.5% of GDP in the 2025-2026 financial year. Now, here to further unpack the minister's midterm budget is Zandile Makhoba, Liberty Group's lead research and insight specialist. I think first the opportunity to give us your thoughts on this year's midterm budget.
So the budget, I think, is very balanced in many ways. There are a lot of positive things coming out of the budget speech. A big focus on managing debt and making sure that we do not become over-indebted as a country. So that focus on getting our debt to GDP ratio down to around 3.2, 3.5% is something that was very encouraging. The other big positive for me was a big focus on the infrastructure conversation, something that's really been a burning issue. Having come off an energy crisis and now going into a water crisis, it's quite critical that we start getting infrastructure right. Talking a lot to the logistics in the country, which is creating a lot of inefficiencies in terms of our trade and production. So that is definitely something very welcome, as well as the creativity around how these projects will be financed going into the future. A big focus on partnering with the private sector on that pillar, but also very encouraging to see a big focus on managing future risks around climate change. So we are starting to see a lot of global warming and climate change issues in the country, and we haven't always been prepared around managing that. So a significant focus in the speech around managing disasters, which is quite welcome as well.
What would you say was some of the disappointments that came out of the speech? I know the Treasury saying that, revenue is likely to come up short again, something that's become a big worry for the country's fiscus.
On the more worrying side, I think the one big challenge that is coming out of the speech is how we're going to balance creating state capacity with reduction in the wage bill. One of the key pillars presented in the four pillars that underpin this budget was this idea of creating state capacity, working police, working hospitals, and so on. But this is just opposed with this idea that we're going to have limitations or even cuts in the wage bill. That is going to be something quite of a challenge for the minister to manage. And we're already starting to see unions showing they upset with this. It is a big issue for South Africa, given the crime, the education challenges, and the health issues that we are experiencing.
What should South African households take away from this midterm budget? Is there hope for them for job creation? Are there things they can look forward to going into the main budget in next year?
I like that you mentioned the word employment, and I think that's going to be one of the critical measures of this budget as we go into next year and the next few fiscal years to come. With the focus on austerity, in a sense, spending cuts here and there, and a limitation on the expansion of debt, the proof point that will be unifying to South Africans is this budget becoming a production of opportunities. So the minister spoke a lot about creating growth and creating employment opportunities. And it very much echoes what we saw in the CEO pledge quite recently, with a big focus, not only just growth, but on employment creation there as well. So given that we are seeing a lot more partnering with the private sector and almost creating more allowances for private sector to do its part, this safety net that government is supposed to provide will then have to come through in different ways. So the private-public partnership, the fruit that will be much more socialist in outcome is managing our unemployment rate. And if jobs are created through this austerity and accommodation of the private sector, I think it will be something that all South Africans welcome.
Minister Godongwana also speaking about the importance of keeping to the agreement around the social wage. A lot of South Africans, some 28 million, relying on grants. Do you think that we've got enough revenue in terms of collection and also enough money as government to run some of these grants into the next year?
Very key. And I think one of the points that the minister impressed is this idea that we are going to make difficult trade-offs. We are going to have to find money somewhere to be able to support this. In terms of the expenditure elements that will increase, the safety nets were definitely one of them. And he mentioned the COVID allowance that was agreed a few years back to be continued. So those that funding definitely already in the basket in terms of creating safety nets for the unemployed. But that is going to come off cuts in other places, and that might be in the public sector wage, which is quite challenging. Quite interestingly as well, in terms of social impact, the minister did mention that they are looking to encourage early retirement for some of the older public workers in order to create more opportunities for younger people. Also one that might be tenuous for our unions at this time. And it's, you know, it hits at the working class a lot in terms of some of these measures where you're increasing support and social safety nets on one hand, but in terms of employment and keeping people in jobs in the public sector is what seems to be going to be at risk. So it's almost, you know, a very difficult and possibly tenuous trade-off that we're looking at from that side of things.
And one way to make that money is to get foreign capital injections, but these are very difficult when you are a country on the grey list. The minister saying that they've worked out about 16 of the 22 conditions that the Financial Action Task Force wanted them to work out. So we're quite close. Does this give you confidence that as we go out to the market to look for more capital for this budget, it will be now possible?
I think the effort really to make sure that we're starting to improve on those pillars is quite critical. And I also think it's quite important for building a culture of reduced corruption within the public sector. So it really does trickle down from what we are expected on the international front to what we also do domestically in order to keep things in order. I do think that it will read well to the international investment market. There is a sense that we are starting to show more stability. The GNU is also being quite well received across the globe. So it does seem like it is a good effort towards meeting those 22 points. And hopefully within the next few months, we will see the remaining 6 being hit.
Minister Godongwana, talking about inclusive growth, I think you mentioned it once, twice or 3 times in that speech. It was very, very popular. What should South Africans read into that message of inclusive growth? What exactly is our government trying to communicate?
I think it's a very clear point that, you know, we're not only supporting, say, your high net worth and your upper affluent segments with regards to this budget. There has been a growing sense that being more friendly to the private sector is something that will put households that are on the poorer end in jeopardy. And this is something that we do want to see managed because we are a country that has high inequality. And this is why I think there's this impression around making sure that whatever growth we achieve is not jobless. South Africa has had a challenge in the past where we've had economic growth that does not create job opportunities, which only then expands our inequality challenges, which then leads to other social issues that we then have to manage. So if we're able to create growth that is job creating and is able to absorb the large number of unemployed people in the country, I think that will be something that definitely reflects the inclusionary aspects that the minister is touching on.
Well, that was Zandile Makhoba, Liberty Group's lead research and insights specialist, talking about the medium-term budget policy statement tabled by Enoch Godongwana this afternoon.